Hello everyone, welcome to Building a Better Sefton. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. You'll probably hear this in the new year. I'm here, I've been ill for 2 weeks. David was ill, Lara was ill. We had to cancel a podcast a couple of weeks ago. I'm still not right. Lara, how are you?
It's been nasty, hasn't it? It was a really horrible flu, and everybody I know has had it, and everybody's had to cancel things over Christmas. So it's been really, really sad. And I'm also still not 100%, still very tired.
Yeah, I think I've got a similar thing. Apparently the hospitals are full of them, and it's just a funny flu this year. But it just seems to be lingering with me as well. And it just gets you to appreciate good health and feeling good when you've got it. And we've both got young ones. It can be very challenging when you're not 100%. Look after yourselves, folks. Yeah, look after yourselves. But I've missed nights out and stuff, and it's been quite disappointing. So here we are. But David isn't here, so we'll talk about the weather. It's quite dull where I am. How is it in central Sefton where you are?
Yeah, it's overcast, it's grey. You can't see any clouds because the sky is one massive cloud. It's slightly warmer than it felt yesterday.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it is.
snow.
Yeah, it is. It is a little milder, I think, today, isn't it? But
it's going to get colder though, isn't it? In the next few days, it's supposed to. I've got my thermal pajamas waiting.
Onwards and upwards. But anyway, wishing everyone the best of health and health and good living in Sefton is what we're all about as well. Now we've got an interesting little episode today. David is busy, and Lara used to be a councillor in another area of the country. So we're going to talk about Lara's experiences as a councillor, where she was, how it was structured, her experiences as a councillor in the Green Party. And I'm going to do like little comparisons maybe with Sefton, but I think it's just interesting to hear what's going on in other areas. I did a podcast a few years ago on another platform with someone from West Lang, so it was quite interesting seeing the difference in the structures there and the difference in casework, etc. So Lara, do you want to tell us a little bit about when you were a councillor and how you got into it then?
Yeah. So before I was a councillor, I didn't really appreciate how the structure of councils works or what the hierarchy is, and I certainly didn't appreciate that different parts of the country have completely different structures. And I'm sure most people don't really think about it. Why would you? It's been very interesting to move from Warwickshire, where I was before, to Sefton and see the completely different ways that they are now run. So I was a councillor in Kenilworth for Kenilworth Park Ward, but I was a district councillor. Now, the way it works in Warwickshire is it's called a two-tier system, but technically there's actually 3 tiers. So here in Sefton, you have the parish councils. So like there's a parish council in Formby, and that's a little group of people who sit around and discuss whether or not they should allow certain planning applications to happen, but they don't really have actually much control over whether it really happens, because those kind of decisions are made by Sefton Council, which is this massive umbrella council that sits over the top and kind of dictates the outcome of most things for the smaller parishes. And obviously it's everything from the top of Southport right down to a bit of Crosby in there, all along the coast. In Warwickshire, you've got the small town councils, parish councils, and then they are within a wider area, which is the district council, which is Warwick District, which includes Warwick, Leamington, and also some of the smaller Kenilworth, which was where I was the actual councillor where I was living, and then some of the little villages around like Radford, Semley, small places, Whitnash. And then you've got county council, which is like the equivalent of Sefton, which is this massive beast that deals also with Rugby and Stratford-on-Avon and North Warwickshire and everything in between. These different hierarchies are dealing with different issues. So in Warwickshire, you've got the county, which is dealing with highways, schools, social care, those kind of big subjects. Whereas at district level, it's planning, which was what I was really interested in, council housing, waste and recycling, parks and leisure. So if your local children's park has a broken slide, you would tell district, and council tax. But if you've got a pothole, then you have to go to county. So it gets a little bit confusing. And so I know that now the government, Labour government, are trying to actually abolish these two-tier systems, and they want to just make it more like how it is in Sefton, where you have one big council who deal with everything, because Sefton does all of that stuff. They do all the district stuff, all the county stuff all together. And it does make it easier for people on the ground, for the average resident, to know who they have to contact, who they have to speak to, but it removes some representation. So what we were dealing with in Warwickshire is, whilst I was a councillor, they were debating whether or not to abolish this two-tier system, and then we were pretty much told by the Labour government that this is going to happen. They're going to be getting rid of it. They haven't quite decided on how that's going to work, on how that's going to be organised. That's still under debate at the moment. It's been under debate now for like a good year, maybe a little bit more. So it's deciding on those boundaries of whether or not they include Stratford-on-Avon, whether they don't, whether it includes rugby, whether it doesn't, and so that's all under debate. What that means is that if they take away representation, the Labour government want to abolish two-tier systems in general. I wouldn't like to speculate too much, but it's because it favours the Labour government, because it removes representation. So if you are a resident of Warwick and you voted for a Green Councillor, and then they just get rid of the district council, that means that me as a Green Councillor is no longer there to represent you, but instead you've got the county level, where it's the first past the post system tends to favour the two-party system, and you're less likely to get the Green councillors, the reform councillors, the ones that people might be favouring, that are less likely to be elected at a large scale, if you know what I mean. So in Sefton, it's more like that already. So you've already got that one massive umbrella Sefton County Council, but you don't have the district level. If I do it in sort of number of councillors, so at Warwick district level you had 44 councillors. At Warwick County there's 57 councillors, I think. So they're just removing those 44 councillors. So that means that the 57 at county level will have to take on all that work that the 44 people were previously doing at district level. And they'll obviously be spreading themselves much more thinly, taking on masses of more work for a much wider area. And that's essentially what already happens here in Sefton. You've got 66 councillors in Sefton Council, and they are representing 22 wards, so they're spread very thinly. And at the moment, from a Green perspective, you've got Councillor Neil Doolin, who's elected for Church Ward in Sefton Council, and I cannot imagine the workload that he must be dealing with on his own, as he's the only Green councillor and he hasn't got a team working with him as fellow councillors. It just must be impossible. And also, in order to have any kind of autonomy or control at council level, you have to be in a team of 4. You have to have 4 councillors for any political group. So the Greens need 4 in order to be able to vote and have the authority to do anything, and in order to become part of a committee. And I didn't even really appreciate this, because in Warwickshire, the Greens were essentially in power at parish level. In Kenilworth, where I was living, it was a Green-led council, and in Warwick District, the Greens had the highest number of councillors. We had 16 councillors just in the district, out of 44. That did not give us overall control. So when I was elected in 2023, we had to choose who we would go into administration with, essentially, in order to run the council. And that was interesting because we put feelers out amongst the other political groups. And we also had a lot of debates about who you think you're most likely to get on with. Like it worked a lot on an individual level. Certain councillors knew other councillors from different parties personally, and they made a lot of decisions based on, like, do I get on with this person? Can I work with them? In the end, it was actually the Labour team of 7 councillors who came to us and suggested a really good deal, and we agreed that we would go into administration with Labour. So it became known as the Green Labour administration. Greens obviously being put first because we had the majority. And the other parties then jokingly referred to us as the watermelon, the watermelon administration, because they were like, we look green on the outside, but we're really just Labour. But obviously that's just nonsense, because we were in power, and having the majority of councillors, you're able to just downvote them constantly. So they didn't really have much control at all, but obviously we were listening to what they're saying. For poor Neil here in Sefton, he doesn't have that luxury at all. He's got very little power, and he is working so hard to represent people, to fight for what he thinks is right. And I mean, it's kind of really shocking to think that he's on his own doing that. And I don't know how he's doing it. I don't even know how he's getting through the email workload. So I really hope that in May next year, very soon, that we're going to get some more Green councillors in Sefton, just so that they can actually work together and actually get on top of on some of these issues. Yeah, so I mean, I absolutely loved being a councillor. I really loved it. It was a fantastic role. I loved being able to represent people. I loved the variety of jobs and going out meeting people, going to different events, and the satisfaction from actually successfully dealing with an issue, of finding a solution to something that was bothering local residents and my fellow residents, and also something that would have affected me potentially. It was a really satisfying job, but I particularly loved being on planning, because my background is in architecture, and I found that it was a really useful use of my skills. I can instantly understand a planning drawing, to be able to make decisions that were coming from a different place rather than from a design perspective. As an architect, I was looking at, we're trained as planners to look at it from, like, how does this impact the community? How does this impact other local residents in that area? What's the impacts on nature and the environment? What's the financial implications? And so it was a very interesting new perspective for me to look at planning. And I now feel that I know a lot about planning, and I'd hope that I get another opportunity to go down that path in the future. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, just a few things to comment on. I know in West Lancs they have that kind of different level of county council as well, and different council layers. In Sefton, it's more of a unitary council, I think, with councils. I think the big issue, seems to me, looking at it from the outside, is that I think being a councillor who does casework in a particular ward probably requires more time than the £11,000 that a councillor gets who is non-cabinet and is often doing another job and looking after kids or whatever as well. And certainly speaking to Bobby Brennan. Now, Labour have dominated Sefton Council for the best part of a decade or longer. And many people say that because a lot of seats are considered safe, that some of the people in those seats don't always engage with the community. Now, it may well be that I know myself when I've done casework in the trade union, which was totally different. Sometimes you'd have people who were constantly on at you and moaning and didn't like you and spoke to you improperly to a varying degrees. And then other people were communicating with you in good faith, and you would engage with those people But what was it like for you managing the workload of a councillor as someone who's obviously keen and wanting to do well in a progressive party that couldn't take being in power for granted? What was that like for you, and how would you explain the job of a councillor to other people if they said, oh, councillors, they don't do nothing, they just get like £11,000 or whatever and just go to the odd vote and the odd meeting unless you've got cabinet responsibility? How would you respond to that?
So I think it was particularly interesting being a Green councillor, because obviously there isn't much history, and the Greens, importantly, aren't whipped. So when we were brought in 2023, or when I was elected, I mean, you could really see it on the faces of the other party councillors. They were shocked by our unpredictability, because we're not whipped. We're not told how to vote. We're not told how to behave. Everybody is an individual. And what's nice about the Green Party, we all happen to be there because we're really passionate about a certain set of morals. And so that makes us actually a very tight unit, because we all tend to be very much on the same page. So that there's a real community spirit amongst the Greens, and there's a lot of camaraderie. We really work well together, whereas you see a lot of infighting in the other parties, because you get a lot of different people, different opinions, who may very strongly feel about a certain issue that they're not allowed to vote for, because they've been whipped and told, oh no, the Labour Party, don't vote for that. Like, we can't vote for that. So that must be really frustrating, and I can't even imagine. That's why I'm not in a different party. That's why I'm in the Greens, because I like that. So already it feels like being in the Greens, you're coming from a place of strength, and you're coming from a place of unity, where we're really in a group. Also, there's not much animosity towards the Greens, so I can go out door knocking and go and meet people, and you very rarely get a lot of negativity, because most people understand our values. They might think we're a bit hippie, trippy, or whatever, and the only negative things you can really say, about Zach Polanski being a hypnotist, or I mean, there's not much you can use against us. So it feels like even when people are really not supportive of my values as a Green councillor, they tend to not be too aggressive about it. Although I was door knocking, and one time I had someone throw a vase at me. One time I did have someone throw eggs at me and chase me down the street. And one person did once sort of aggressively snatch a flyer out of my hand and then dump it in the recycling bin. And I was like, well, at least you're recycling.
Well, if they just put it in the bin, you just said, we're really not on the same wavelength.
Yeah, exactly. So I haven't completely answered your question yet, which is what's it like to actually work as a councillor, and also what do you say? So in Warwickshire, we only earned between 5,000 to 6,000, so it was less.
Because it's variable, isn't it?
District level. And I was also doing 4 jobs at the time. So I was working as a ballet teacher, as a swimming teacher. I was a radio DJ host. I was also on the Architects Register, although I wasn't actually working in practice at the time, and I was a councillor. So it was insane balancing all of that. And then yes, you might get maybe, let's say I get a couple of emails on a Monday, one saying, please help me, someone's dumped a bin in my back garden, what do I do? And someone saying, oh, I've got a leaking wall, live in a council house, please come and have a look. So I would contact both those people. I'll arrange to go and see them as soon as possible. You have to also be careful of these things, especially as a woman, but I think any councillor, you have to be aware, like, is this genuine? Am I really going to this person's house? Is it going to be safe? We try not to go inside unless you know the situation and you can sort of really see that it's okay. Yes, some residents, I didn't actually have any situations where it wasn't genuine and it wasn't safe, but we were very aware that there's a possibility. And of course, I think that the main thing to remember is that you do have some negativity. You do occasionally meet people who say things to you, particularly when you're door knocking and you're just meeting anybody. And it's just reminding them, I'm just a resident who felt really passionate about what was happening in my town. I just want to change things. And so when someone says something like, oh, you're earning money, why aren't you doing anything? You're useless. It's like, well, then why don't you do something? Why don't you stand and get elected? And why don't you go and change things the way you want it? Because that's all I did. I was just a resident who stood and got elected, which was fantastic. And I was really, really lucky and really privileged to be elected. But I had the guts to do that in the first place. And I think I just don't understand people who complain and moan about it, but don't do anything.
Yeah. I think with casework as well, I did trade union casework, and I did it 3 days a week and taught 2 days a week. And a lot of the stuff I got were emails or telephone calls with people. Meetings were arranged, or I would say, right, here's the information you need. And then they would proceed with this information in whatever way. Or I would sometimes signpost and say, speak to these people. Or I would sometimes send an email on their behalf to make inquiries. And I'd have to go on the internet and research. And sometimes I'd have to phone someone up and get advice. And it was quite intense. It was very intense, really. Particularly if you're passionate and you're conscientious and you're coming from a helping people perspective. And I know that Bobby next door said that, we've spoken to people who say, oh yeah, you get used to the money and then it's just another job and all that stuff. And I always think back to the famous quote attributed to Mark Twain that underwear and politicians need changing regularly for the same reason. I think one of the things I would say is, as someone who comes from the left who's been in the Labour Party, there's a lot of distrust of the Labour Party in South Sefton because of names, family names, etc. And I just think that we just need fresh faces in the Labour Party, if nothing else, for people to come in with new eyes and new visions. Not to say that all the people who are in there, are no good, who are in the Labour Party, in South Sefton in particular at the moment. But I just think things do need to change from time to time. And we do need new people and new perspectives. And I think people like me and you going into casework jobs, I only did it for a couple of years, and I just thought it's very frustrating because I was conscientious, and people like yourself were going in with good intentions, and then you come up against a lot of stuff which is quite negative. And I think it is hard representing people and trying to better people. I think particularly in a political climate as toxic as it is at the moment as well, it is tough. But I think that management of workload and caseload, if you're conscientious and you want to help people, it can really, really get on top of you. And I think it is difficult to balance everything.
Yeah, definitely. And that is why it was so important and useful to have a team. So when I was elected in Kenilworth Park Ward, the 2 other candidates were elected at the same time for Kenilworth Park Ward. So that's not a huge area. And there were other Greens elected in other parts of Kenilworth. So that's just in Kenilworth. There was a whole group of us. And so because I was representing Kenilworth Park Ward, if something happened in that region, if I got an email, if I had a huge influx of emails, because it's random, it just depends whenever people have issues. As you know, doing casework, you can go a week with hearing nothing at all, and then suddenly you get 20 emails on one day. I was able to spread that load, so I could just call up my fellow councillors and be like, oh, there's this one of your neighbours, James, needs some help, or can you go and have a look at this for me? And so we could just spread it out. And again, it's back to the same thing will be happening now to Neil Doolin here in Sefton for this massive area that's the whole of Sefton, under whole Sefton Unitary. And that's a lot of people that he's dealing with, and all by himself. And he's got no one to spread that load with. So it's really important to have a team. And I hope that the Greens can expand into the next year, and just so that we can actually show what we're actually able to do, because I think we've not had that opportunity before. So a lot of people outside the Greens don't take it seriously, or don't take us seriously as a party, because they've never really actually seen what we're capable of.
I think that, just to declare, you're still in the Green Party.
Yes.
I've joined the Green Party recently, and there's a lot of debate about the national Green Party, Zach Polanski, people pulling up a few things about him. I still think if you compare him with the leaders of pretty much all the other main political parties, I still think he's probably the most consistent and someone with the most integrity of all of them. And I think it's been quite refreshing with him speaking to people at their level, and also going into the Dragon's Lair with people on the right and people also on the far right, and really going at them with logical, rational debate. It's been so refreshing. It's something I haven't seen for a long time. I know Mamdani in New York's been, a similar kind of person over the pond. But I think the Greens locally are known for genuine community interest, genuinely people who want to get in, don't want to be whipped into shape, and do have an element of independence. Now, Neil Doolin's been on, great fella. He spoke about the way he's been treated as well by the local Labour Party. Now, me and David have spoken to a number of people, like Bobby Brennan when he was on Children's Services, about how it's important when you have on scrutiny committees, and maybe if different parties are on there, the dominant party can say, good, this is good criticism, yeah, this is the transparency that we need. And then things like what happened in Children's Services in recent years when it became really problematic, maybe they wouldn't have arisen if we had, proper scrutiny and not one particular party dominating. And I think that when Neil came on, he obviously, he's come in, he's fresh, and he's really put new eyes on things. He really wants to change things. Now, there may be more Green councils after the upcoming elections in May, so there's all-out elections across Sefton, all 66. Now, it's weird, isn't it, that you've got different councils with different layers, and the Labour Party trying to harmonise them. And they're trying to, there's been elections which have been cancelled and rearranged and all that, and some people saying, oh, you're taking away local democracy. Exactly. And it may be in a few years things will settle down, etc. But it is very convoluted at the moment, because I remember sometimes I'd get a call when I was doing casework and go, well, I can't do anything about that, but this person can, or you need to phone these or whatever. My sister in Scotland has worked for 2 Scottish MPs, and she said she'd have people calling her, and she'd say, you need to speak to your local member of the Scottish Parliament about that issue. I can only represent issues that are across the UK. Then you had the European thing as well, which is now gone because we've left the EU. Then you've got these councils where you go, oh, well, I'm at this level of the council, so you need to speak to that person about that. There's loads of that going on. And I think what's good is that, if you get a contact, we would urge people to contact local councillors and local MPs, and then you will get signposted to the right people. And it's important that people do engage and don't give up. Now, my sister lives in a very small village. They're very active in that village. And if something's not right in the village, everyone's onto it. But it's when you live in these bigger places where things get lost, where people think, oh, I'm giving up and what can I do? That is disempowering. But we do urge people to get involved and email your local representatives in good faith, and hopefully they will respond in good faith too. And that's how democracy works, and that's how it should work, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I always responded. If somebody contacted me, I always responded. But I mean, when you are just a normal person and you've got other job commitments and also family, it's not always necessarily immediately. And so I did have a couple of times when I just wasn't fast enough, and someone contacted me, and I might have had a full day's work for maybe 3 days in a row and didn't even have time to really look at my council emails. And there was 1 or 2 times when someone wrote a second email that was a bit more angry, like, why are you ignoring me? And he'd be like, yes, because sorry, I am just a normal person with many jobs I have to deal with.
But then you respond in the right way and go, I'm so sorry, I
Yeah.
I haven't been on emails for these reasons. Then hopefully those people learn that. But that's again how democracy works. Like trying to get an appointment at your GPs is problematic. Trying to get into the dentist is problematic.
Yeah.
Again, if things are only funded at a certain level, there's only much certain people can do. And that's why we need to look at how our society works and not be batting people away and encouraging participation, but also have the structures in place where participation is then developed and getting more and more people involved. Because, I mean, we can talk about the rise of reform separately. And I know that on this podcast, me, David, yourself, we've spoken to independents on the left. We've spoken to Green Party. We've spoken to the Lib Dems. We've spoken to the Conservatives. Very hard for me and someone like David to speak to a Conservative councillor with the way we feel about things. But I thought that Mike Prendergast came on and spoke very well. I couldn't really disagree with what he was saying about council issues. I might disagree with his worldview. We want Labour to come on, and Labour are trying to control have like a clear presentation of what they believe through their own media. Again, each to their own. They might say, oh, building a better Sefton, you're insignificant. But we do want people to be involved, to be aware of things, and not just to respond with that kind of lowest common denominator politics of, all the councillors are bad. We need to get a grip on these HMOs. All these immigrants are coming and taking over our communities and all this stuff which you see all over the social media environment. It must be hard being a councillor in that kind of environment where people are frustrated. And you do get a lot, like, I don't know if you know Councillor Joe Johnson, who is really taking a positive image as a Labour councillor in Netherton. And he's really engaging with people on social media and stuff. But I do feel like he's restricted by the party he's in. And the environment at the moment is that there's a lot of low levels of trust. But often the stuff you see on social media from quite a small minority of people, it is very, very depressing how toxic and populist and blaming minorities. That seems to be the be-all and end-all. So did you have any stuff from that with people attacking you because you were a Green, or do you think that because you weren't necessarily, depending on where you are in the country, of course, but because you were kind of new and, it was before Polanski, that people didn't really take that line? I know you hinted at this before, but did you deal with any people who were very toxic towards you?
Yes. So it's really notable. So on the very first full council meeting at Warwick District, they set it up physically in the room so that you have the administration on one side of the room facing all the other councillors on the other side of the room. So we'd organised our administration. So it was essentially the Greens in a long front row sitting across, and then you had like the officers who sit here to the left of me. So we were all the Greens sat at the front, completely brand new, just elected, sat at the front. I can't see any of my fellow councillors because they're parallel to me in a line. The Labour and the rest of the Greens were behind me, including the leader. For some reason, they put the leader in the back row. And then opposite me, I was facing the Lib Dems, the Conservatives, and the Independents. That's pretty much the setup. So I'd just been elected. I'm there sat next to my fellow two councillors who also have just been elected as Greens, and we've walked into the room, we sit down, and we're facing these angry Lib Dems, and they were glaring into our souls like the evils that we were getting off these people. And like any time one of us spoke, they would laugh. It was like being in primary school. So we would start talking, and they were turning to each other and going, I know, like this, and like, or they'd be just going, like while we were talking, and it was like, what is this? This is ridiculous. I could not believe the level of immaturity. I was shocked. And what was hilarious is how rapidly they realised who we were and that you could not mess with us. I mean, it happened within minutes. So over the course of that one meeting, that was maybe a couple of hours, they went from behaving like that at the beginning to sort of sitting back in their seats, just like, oh, and then. I mean, it was fantastic, especially at the end when we all just stood up and me and my fellow councillor Dave. You know, I'm pretty tall, and Dave he's nearly 7 foot, and then the two of us just sort of strode past them, looking over their heads like, "You are insignificant." It was fantastic. So it's all these little games that get played, the psychological games, and seriously, the majority of it came from the Lib Dems initially. I think because they were so put out that we hadn't gone into administration with them, despite us actually putting out olive branches right at the beginning. Like, you know, we feel the Greens and Lib Dems would potentially work well together. They were like, no way. We put them in their place, and it was fun to watch. But also kind of sad that they had to be so immature about it. And I know, I mean, you see it when you watch Parliament on TV, or you see them Question Time, and it just it's ridiculous. Sometimes I'm shocked at how childish they are. But it really, really does exist. I think the most shocking thing for me was actually discovering how well we worked with the Conservatives. That whenever some of the really serious debates came up, like I was expecting us to be on, you know, so we're such on political opposite ends of the spectrum, and yet I think they have so much experience in governing at every level. They were very reasonable when it came to actually discussing, and they tended not to play too many silly games, whereas you know, the Lib Dems in particular were a sneaky bunch. But that, again, I go back to the fact that as Greens we aren't whipped, which means that we would strategically send certain people into certain meetings from our Green group, people that we knew had the right personality for that particular meeting or that particular group of people, because we vote in different ways, we behave in different ways as Greens, and we are completely independent thinkers. And we were really able to utilise that as a group. It was really interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating, the dynamics of it all. And I've been in like meetings here. I went. They used to have something called action committees, I think they were called, or was it action groups, which they've no longer got. And they got rid of ward action groups, which were probably better. Bobby Brennan, former councillor, said used to get people from the locality turn up, and then they introduced these more wider things, and people couldn't get to them. But I went to some in Southport, where you had Lib Dems and Conservatives. Now there's Labour there and Independents as well. But they used to have some good debates, and it could be quite confrontational. But they had some good debates, and you know, agreed and disagreed on things. And then I went to one in South Sefton, which was just all Labour, and everyone was just like nodding it through, you know, because there was no real debate or discussion, and they'd been whipped. I know Bobby said that cabinet government should end, whereby you've got the cabinet who make the key decisions, collective responsibility from the cabinet in the higher paid positions. The rest of the party get whipped, and then they try to close down debate. And I know Bobby said that shouldn't really be happening. People need to be representing their constituents more, and there should be better debates. And sometimes there'll be a question and someone will just say no, and then they'll just move on without even addressing what was raised in the question. And we get this with human behaviour generally, groupthink in party politics, but I do think we deserve better. And I know some people like the drama of Prime Minister's questions in this country, and I do think that one of the problems with a presidential system like, say, Trump isn't really tested. And I think he would be exposed a lot more if we did have that kind of more adversarial style to a degree. But the behaviour of politicians, I think, is often reprehensible. And I think the last 10 years, obviously since Johnson became Prime Minister, I think ultimately he was exposed through Prime Minister's questions a lot of the time. And I think that was helpful. But the adversarial stuff, I think, is disgraceful at times. And when I look at Westminster now, and again, the last 10 years, we've seen a lot change in the US. We've seen a lot change here for the worse. And the power of social media, the rise of populism and all this stuff. But I do feel that the current Westminster model is very, very concerning, not just the iniquities of the first past the post system and a party having 2/3 of the seats with 1/3 of the vote.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
The leader of the opposition at the moment is a caricature. The leader of Reform and the Reform Party are just like, your racist uncle writ large, like stupid, the worst guy in the pub who no one likes, and putting them in Parliament and saying, oh, they're funny though, aren't they? And they will ask questions that no one else will ask. Yeah, because they're completely missing the point. They want to do Doge, cut everything. That hasn't worked well in any of the Reform councils. It didn't work in the States either. Oh, we need to get rid of all this wokery and DEI. They get in, they look at it. Oh, not much there we can do. Let's spend loads of money putting flags up. You've got loads of them raising council tax, arguing amongst themselves, embarrassing. And all these Reform councils around the country and Reform generally now, it's like, oh, actually, ruling's hard and governance hard and power's hard. And just blaming immigrants for everything. Yeah, okay, that might be funny for you, but doesn't really solve any problems and just tends to make things worse. So it is hard, isn't it, running local councils and making difficult decisions, and Reform are coming in. And I'd like to think in this country, maybe more so than the States, they will be exposed for what they are, and maybe we can hold them to account, and maybe we'll see before the next set of local elections and national elections that Reform are just paper tigers who just blame minorities, and that's all they've got. Anyway, that was a bit of a rant. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, my first thought was, I think that in order to be a successful leader, you need to be liked. And yes, you could be a leader like certain people in the world who, well, it's just best not to talk about, who are not particularly liked, but people are too scared to even say. But I think it goes in your favour long term if people like you. And in order to be liked, you've got to have compassion and empathy, and to appeal to the masses and to understand people and have time for them and listen to what they're really saying and what they really need. And I think the Greens in general are quite good at that. So, and they spend a lot of time listening rather than just telling people what's wrong with someone else. I mean, the Reform approach is very negative. It's very like, it's us versus them. These people are a problem. Those people are a problem. If we came in, we wouldn't do this. We wouldn't be like them. And it's all this really negative rhetoric. And I think that the Greens, at least, it's about hope and positivity. But I mean, hey, every other party has a different approach in between. And I think it just, what really is helpful is if we work together. Actually, people work as individuals together. And so I think whipping really doesn't help, because it forces a lack of debate. It cuts the argument. It stops people being able to say what they really think and what their individual thoughts are and what their residents in their particular area really need and want. They're just whipped into shape and told, oh well, this is what we do, this is what we say. And I don't understand that at all. I don't get it. I just think that's just lame. It's just a poor excuse for politics.
Absolutely, and I think the problem is as well in politics is you can go into politics in good faith, and then all of a sudden you can come up against people who are coming at you in bad faith, and it's how you address that, and it's about why they're like that. And again, a lot of human nature and ego, the love of power. I think that the problem you're getting with like some of these more extreme far-right groups is like this kind of belief in this ideology, like the great replacement theory, that whites are being replaced deliberately, to turn us woke and all that, and that conspiracy nonsense. there's that belief that they have that may be sincere for them, but it's also appealing to the crowd that they see who get angry about those particular issues. And it's when, like, you know, you've got people who come into politics, like Zach Polanski's talking about the cost of living crisis. He's saying it's the big issues that are, and one of the things most people are going, looking at him going, he's right. So what's his solutions? We need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And the reform thing seems to be, blame the Labour Party for everything. Maybe don't mention cost of living, but when asked, like, how would you improve cost of living? They haven't really got any answers, or the answers that they come up with are quickly found out to be nothing. And I'm still concerned for this country moving forward, whether we have got the transparency and democratic accountability and the media these days to expose them for what they are. And I think that's the great issue moving forward over the next few years, because literally in the last 10 years, you've got the climate crisis turned into a culture war issue, immigrants basically blamed for everything on the right. Even the Conservative Party now are saying the violence against women and girls thing, they were talking about like violence against women and girls in schools, teaching it, and the leader of the opposition is saying it shouldn't be getting taught to boys in school. We need to focus on people coming from other countries. It's like, okay, how can she be allowed to even say that? All the right-wing papers are totally in support of her. But I saw an advert last night. I know this is something we've spoken about before, and it was famous people talking about what violence against women and girls is. Have you seen it? The government one? Oh, it's brilliant. I saw it yesterday twice, and I looked at it and thought, it's saying, it was calling out the behaviour, and I thought, Jordan Pickford's on there, Dan Burn, some women footballers and stuff. And I think it was on the sports channel, so it was appealing to, obviously a lot of men watch the sports channel. It said, are you controlling who she texts and who she speaks to? Are you controlling how she spends her money, what she wears? And I thought, there's going to be quite a few people who hear that who'll go, maybe I do that.
Yeah.
And there's going to be people who watch it who go,
that's interesting.
That's happened to me. And I actually thought that advert, it really, really was profound. I thought there's going to be people watching that going, do you know what? And there may be people who have been doing some of that without even realising it. And then you're going to get people who will look at it, or people will look at it and go, their friends are going through that. I thought it was really powerful.
That's fantastic. I'm really encouraged.
It was brilliant. But you've got the leader of the opposition saying that we shouldn't be teaching about violence against women in schools, violence against women and girls in schools to white boys.
Well, in my experience, it's white British boys and men that I've only ever experienced what I have, which I've talked about in the past. So, yeah.
I just find it terrifying. It's like literally the Emperor's New Clothes. Like you've got Robert Jenrick in the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, Reform, Labour even are paying lip service to some of it with, like the Island of Strangers thing, and Starmer standing up going like, Conservatives with their open borders and all that. Like, it's like performative nonsense where the Emperor's not wearing any clothes and we're all being asked to say that the Emperor's not wearing any.
It looks lovely.
Sorry, the Emperor's, the tale of that. Like, I just feel like people are being gaslighted at a new level now over the last 10 years. And I am very, very worried about it. And I don't want to see it coming to local government. And I think the next general election is going to be a very, very interesting one.
It is. I'm nervous.
I've often thought, I've gone past all the flags and stuff thinking, okay, these flags are being funded by far-right groups, and the people who put them up are probably going to be the people who say, stop the boats, blame immigrants for everything. But it doesn't mean that the flag represents them. But I often thought, I've read quite a lot about Nazi Germany and the Weimar Republic in the 30s. To be in the States at the moment with him in power, and to be in Italy, which was a country that was led by Mussolini not that long ago. You've got Meloni in power there. She's kind of softened things a little bit. But you've got the right in the ascendancy, Alternative for Deutschland, with like literally pro-Nazi opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I often wonder, if like Nigel Farage became Prime Minister and there was a majority reform, maybe with a Conservative administration, what year would you put that in I'm a historian, in the Weimar Republic? The idea of like, they blame the Jews and the November criminals for signing the peace treaty at the end of World War One. What's that? The betrayers of Brexit, the World Economic Forum, the EU, all these foreign entities telling us what to do, betraying the country. We've had all that. I'm genuinely terrified as to what happens when your school curriculum starts getting changed because reforms say you have to teach exactly like this. To what extent does it become a problem when newspapers can no longer print certain things critical of government? He would do that for Farage at the drop of a hat. And I don't think a lot of people on the right, so blinded by the hatred of immigrants or whatever, I don't think they've really thought it through, the implications of what these authoritarian governments would do.
Yeah, although saying that, you've already got Labour and the education, what's her name, Bridget Phillipson, say, haven't they already discussed removing things like Shakespeare and stuff because they were saying it was too highbrow, and it's like, sorry, but why would you want to teach the lowest common denominator? Or surely you want to just educate people, give them the breadth of knowledge, give them everything. Don't take things away and decide what people are capable of and what they're not. That's mind-numbingly dumb. Yeah,
I think as a former teacher, I think the exam system needs to change considerably. But
yes,
dumbing things down, and for everyone, I don't think that's the answer. But that's another kettle of fish. Listen, we've spoken for nearly an hour there. I thought we might be a little bit briefer.
I'm actually having a battery issue. So my battery's about to go. I might just get randomly cut off any second.
Everyone watching, thanks Lara for coming on and sharing your knowledge of being a councillor, because you've walked the walk, and we haven't really talked at all. But thanks for coming on with all your insights. There's loads of stuff there for people to consider. Also, people who are watching, if you could like and subscribe, particularly on our Building a Better Sefton channel on YouTube and Spotify. If you want to get involved, get in touch with us, come on, know someone who might want to come on, please do so. And let's build a better Sefton. And if you can contribute financially through our coffee account or through our subscription on Substack, you can do that as well. All the info will be in the notes. And let's build a better media and build a better Sefton, because there's a lot of really bad stuff out there. So let's see what we can do, folks. Lara, thank you for coming on. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Bye.